Now, we get to this idea of genetic drift. This is the third agent of evolutionary change. And genetic drift is really due to random effects. So when we have random effects that cause a population to become very small, at least the founding population to be very small, we get random selection of individuals that pass those traits on. And that is our idea of genetic drift. So let's take a look here. With genetic drift, there's a couple of examples of genetic drift that we want to talk about. One type of genetic drift is called the founder effect. Now, the founder effect occurs, well, yes, we also have the bottleneck effect. Let me get to that there. Okay, so here we go, the founder effect, where you have a subset from a population migrate to a new location to start a new population. And this results in changes in allele frequencies. So here we have a population and we have an equal frequency of red, green, and blue alleles here amongst these C stars, all within this same population. Now, if a small subset of those migrates, say these three individuals were to migrate to a new area and start a colony, realize not all the alleles are present in a small subset of the population. Therefore, you will have a reduction in that genetic variation and a change in allele frequencies. And keep in mind, when we talk about evolution, it's about changes of allele frequencies. So this is the founder effect. Certainly we could imagine that if our class of 20-some students were to be sent to Mars to start a whole new colony of humans, would we have the entire genetic diversity of all the human population with us? No, we just have a small subset of that population. There would be certain populations that would not be represented amongst us at all as we carried that, and many of the alleles within the human population would not be carried with us either. The other example of genetic drift is the bottleneck effect. So in the bottleneck effect, you have a population which is randomly or drastically reduced in size, typically due to some natural event. So this may be due to a volcanic eruption. This may be due to a tidal wave coming in or a fire coming through. And as a result, you have a large percentage of the population dying off in that event. So the bottleneck, you have the population being drastically reduced, thus resulting in a change in allele frequencies. And that, my friends, is the bottleneck effect. So when we think about genetic drift, generally these are random effects. They're due to small populations. And we have two examples of these, the founder effect and the bottleneck effect. The most powerful agent of evolutionary change is natural selection. So this is where the environment decides which individuals will survive. So whether they can, again, we're talking about the ability to find food, the ability to avoid disease, the ability to find sites to raise your young or to avoid the elements and the like. It's important to realize that natural selection is the only agent of evolutionary change that leads to adaptive change. This is the only force that leads to a population that is better suited to that given environment. And it's important to realize that evolution just selects for traits that are best suited or better suited to the current environment. Evolution doesn't select for the best, okay, just for what works. So here we've got some larvae here, some caterpillars that happen to be various colors, and those ones that are yellow are being removed from the gene pool because they are being preyed upon. So in the future generations, the offspring will be more likely to have green coloration and thus will be better adapted to their environment because they'll be better suited to avoid predators. Now we could go back to our example of bacteria here where we had the mutation. Well, let's say we take that population and the individual takes antibiotics. When the individual takes antibiotics, all of those bacteria that are susceptible die off, leaving only those bacteria that are resistant, which then thrive and multiply. So this is really a very important factor in our society today, is the development of antibiotic resistant bacteria. And this development of antibiotic resistant bacteria is all about evolution. Now, when we look at these 5 agents of evolutionary change, what I would like you to do is to think about what impact they have on populations. So take a few moments here and think about how each of these agents of evolutionary change would affect the genetic diversity within a population. So would they tend to increase the genetic diversity within a population or decrease genetic diversity within a population? So do take some time to think about that, certainly before our upcoming test. So as we're starting to wrap things up here, one of the other terms that you'll come across in class is this idea of fitness. And when we think about fitness, in terms of evolution, or in terms of biology, this is the ability of an organism to survive and reproduce in a given environment. So an organism with better fitness will be better suited to survive and produce more offspring in that environment. An organism with less fitness will not be as well suited to survive and reproduce in a given environment. And we quantitate fitness by the number of offspring that are left in the next generation. Now, you've often heard of evolution described as survival of the fittest. And I'd like you to take that idea and really critically think about that. Is it only the fittest organisms that survive and reproduce? What I would like you to think of evolution as is survival of the fit enough. And in terms of natural selection and evolution, you only have to be good enough to survive and good enough to find a mate to pass their genes on in order to pass those traits on. So really we should think about evolution as survival of the fit enough. And certainly we know that evolution does not select for what's best in a given environment. It really selects for what works in a given environment. And we'll see that as we talk about some of the evidences for evolution. So your book has a great example of fitness looking at the water strider. Maybe you've seen these on a pond or stream. And a research project was taking a look at the number of eggs laid per day in terms of fitness by female water striders. And they found that the larger female striders lay more eggs per day, suggesting what is the fittest size for female water striders? Well, probably around 15 millimeters. Well, if it was just survival of the fittest, would we really have any female water striders that were down at 12.5 millimeters? Let's take a look at this in a little more detail, because there are other factors that play a role. What about the lifespan of female water striders? Well, here we see that smaller female water striders actually live longer than larger water striders. Thus, when we take those two factors together and look at how many eggs are laid over a lifetime, we actually have a variation, a continuum here, where what we'd say is the fittest size for female water striders would be around 14 millimeters. But are there still water striders that are 12.5 millimeters long? Certainly. So keep in mind, evolution is not about survival of the fittest, it's survival of the fit enough. And evolution is just selecting for what works, not for what's best. So that wraps up some of our agents for evolutionary change. Again, if you have questions, feel free to post those on the discussion board or contact me during office hours. So hope you have a great day and enjoy studying evolution.